Welcome to the Iron Butterfly Podcast. My name is Megan Jaffer.
And I'm Katie Hopkins, and we will be your hosts.
We created Iron Butterfly Podcast in honor of Eloise Page, the original Iron Butterfly. 80 years ago, Eloise joined the Office of Strategic Services, trailblazing a path for what ultimately became the United States intelligence community. She rose the ranks from secretary to case officer, defying the norms of her time, and eventually became the first female chief of station at CIA. Eloise was known among her colleagues to be a fierce fighter with a core of steel, and she earned the codename Iron Butterfly. Our podcast continues her legacy, inviting the unsung heroines of the United States intelligence community to share their stories with aspiring leaders like you. Women in the intelligence community are special because they have dedicated their lives to studying the whole world. And through conversations with hundreds of women in intelligence over the past few years, we have come to understand that the world is at an inflection point. Women hold a more central role in society than ever before, and at Iron Butterfly Media, we are committed to amplifying authentic voices that inspire women to create wherever they are. So pull up a chair. Our changing world needs new ideas made real, which begins with you. Welcome to Iron Butterfly Podcast.
Hi everyone, my name is Alexandra Joseph and I am the engagement manager here at Iron Butterfly. And I'm introducing our guest today, and before we do that, here is a little bit about me. I've been with Iron Butterfly since January 2024. Outside of my role at Iron Butterfly, I'm a graduate student at Texas A&M University, the Bush School of Government and Public Service at the DC teaching site. Here, I am obtaining a degree in National Security and Intelligence with a focus in Iran and Farsi language. I previously held roles at Elysium Inc., a Japanese software firm, and General Dynamics Land Systems in both engineering and strategy. My passion for Iron Butterfly developed during Season 1, and it's been an honor to now be a part of its inner workings. I was fortunate to connect with Megan and Katie in 2023, introducing the podcasts and our guests during a live episode recording at the Bush School DC. Developing a relationship with Megan and Katie and joining Iron Butterfly has definitely been a bucket list item. So now over to our amazing guest. Today we are joined by Caitlin Marsh. Caitlin Marsh is currently VP of Product at SpiderOak. Previously, she served at In-Q-Tel, an organization at the intersection of the U.S. government, the venture community, and startup technology, in addition to roles across the aerospace and defense industry, including Ball Aerospace. She is energetic, empathetic, kind, and spicy, and her hobbies include soccer, Formula One, and traveling. And a great fun fact about Caitlin is that she has ballroom danced with Bill Nye, the science guy. Caitlin, welcome to Iron Butterfly, and we're so excited to have you on the podcast.
Bill.
Caitlin, welcome to Iron Butterfly.
Thank you. Thanks for
We
having me.
are so excited for this episode.
I'm excited to sit down with both of you. I feel like I see you guys quite a bit, but I don't talk about myself like this with you guys.
No,
Totally.
I think that's the thing, is that it's normally like work or extracurricular related. And
Totally.
so it's not like, tell me about your life, Caitlin,
Right.
you know?
I don't think I've ever asked Caitlin about her life. And we've known each other for like a long time.
Go ahead,
I'll
sorry.
say maybe the first time. When I meet people for the first time, usually I'll say, what's your story? And it's
Yeah.
always interesting to see how they tell their story and where they started.
Yeah.
And sometimes they jump right into their resume, but sometimes you get the whole
Totally.
thing.
Yeah, I don't like when people jump into the resume.
I know. I also feel like sometimes the way I tell my story is like different on Tuesday than it is on Thursday.
Oh, for
like,
sure.
If you catch me on a good day or catch me on a bad day.
Yeah.
Today a good
I
day?
think the
Yeah,
most,
I know, we'll find out.
well, she's not telling her story.
guess
You're
that's
telling your
true.
story.
Today's a good day.
I think the most I learned about you, or like the more private stuff, was when we were in New York for a Command Purpose Gala. And I don't know if you remember, I won't share what we were talking about, but we were in a cab with another woman and we were sharing like personal stories about how we felt about certain things. And that was like, I think the most I've gotten of your story.
Well, I tend to, especially if I see you in a professional environment, I tend to be a lot less candid than I normally am. And I'm a candid
Yeah.
person generally. But you get me in a cab after a drink. And
That's a safe space for everyone.
No, for real. That's why they had those taxi cab confessions. Everybody felt that way. We need to
needs
bring
cash
those
cab?
back. Yeah.
Confession cab.
We need that.
Oh my
Bring
God,
those
somebody
back.
call-
HBO.
Yes.
We need you to bring that back. So, Caitlin, before we started, we were chatting because this past weekend we had our first ever party for Iron Butterfly alumni, and it was really cool. We got a lot of the. I guess we call them alumni, right? Alumni Iron Butterflies together to celebrate them. And not everyone was able to make it, but a lot of people were, and it was really fantastic. And I said, what did you think about it? And your response on why it was important and what you got out of it was just so beautiful. And I was like, save it for the mic. So could you share with us what you shared with me earlier?
Yeah, absolutely. So I thought the event was amazing. Having that many incredible, talented women in one room is something you don't get very often. And we were watching the trailers for the upcoming documentary, and I found myself crying. I should say, I cry pretty easily, especially at like moving things. But what I started to realize was all of us just go about day to day doing our jobs. And you don't really ever think about the impact you're having on not only the mission and the national security industry, but on others around you, and setting an example and saying like, yeah, I just did this job, but what I was able to do really, provided an opportunity and provide space for others to also flourish and to, provide their impact to the mission in maybe a different way. Whether it's through, enabling them on your team or through just representing a woman in a position of whatever your position is. And you don't think about the impact you're having on those around you in the community because you're just doing your job.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
I thought it was beautiful, so I wanted her to say it on mic.
Now it's on the record.
It's just nice to, I don't know, it's nice every now and then just to reflect and think about, what you're doing in the bigger picture. We don't always have time for that.
Totally. Well, I think it's it's easy to see why in a national security or intelligence profession you're motivated by mission. But when we come on the podcast and we talk to people about the most meaningful moments in their career, it's almost always like individual, like making an impact on a person or like connecting with a person or mentoring a person or being mentored by a person. And I do think you're right. Like sometimes you have to really reflect to pick out those moments, but it's really the personal connection that I think like resonates with people.
Absolutely. And as we go through this podcast, I think you'll hear that resonates with me, right? I'm very much a people person. I might be an engineer by trade, but I've been called a social engineer. And not in a conniving way by any means, right? But in a way of like understanding people and understanding needs and how to support each other and how do we lift each other up together.
Absolutely.
Totally.
So
shall we go back to the beginning?
Yes, for sure. For sure. So, we wanted to learn a little bit about you. And so I was hoping you could share with us, tell us your background, where you grew up and, where you went to school and what you studied and how you ended up in the national security space.
All right. It won't be short.
No, we don't.
That's
we don't
why
like
we're
short.
here.
Yeah.
So I grew up in Frederick, Maryland. I'm one of two. My brother is 33 this year.
Shout out, brother.
Shout out, brother. It's funny. He and I are very similar people, and we get along so well. But he manages a brewery.
Oh my God, that's awesome.
Yeah, and lives a very different, I could say, life than I do. But he's such a wonderful human. Anyways, grew up in Frederick, and my family's always been really close. We don't have a big family. And so it's funny, I always look at my family as the family friends that we've always had over. My parents' house was always that house that everybody came together. And so for holidays, my parents hosted dinners, usually the night before the main holiday when people didn't have other family obligations. And so our house was always full of laughter.
Were that house.
Yeah, my parents did acquire a ping pong table, and we do not own ping pong paddles. We were that house.
That's amazing.
Still are. Yeah. So I always joke that I haven't left the Beltway. So I went to school at the University of Maryland, studied aerospace engineering, and I was just telling the story before. I know we were just talking about this before we started, where, when I was 12, I really I love dolphins, and I just wanted to work with dolphins. And I remember I had a biology teacher, I think it was 10th grade, who said, asked what we want to do in the future. And I mentioned that. And she said, that's absolutely wonderful. In the big scheme of marine biology, not that many people get to play with dolphins. So think about, what else might you want to do if that doesn't work out? And I was good enough at math. And I was like, I don't know, maybe I'll do engineering. Well, what engineering do I want to do? Growing up, my father is an airplane enthusiast. Our house is full of airplane models that I am lucky enough to inherit, I hope. We grew up going to air shows. We go to the airport just to watch planes take off, which to this day, I'm one of those people who gets to the airport extra early because I just like airports and watching planes. And so I said, I love airplanes. I want to be around airplanes. I'm going to do aerospace engineering. So I went to the University of Maryland and did that. At Maryland, about halfway through, you have to choose the space track or the air track, so fixed wing or satellites. I chose air. I studied helicopters as my focus in my research. Yeah, I studied helicopters.
Why did you choose helicopters?
Because it was the research project that all my friends were on.
Okay, honest answer. Honest answer.
Well,
she's a social engineer.
Yeah.
It's case in point.
Well, when we talk about community, it was an opportunity to get to spend more time with my friends and have that support system as you're doing research and doing homework and things like that. And I remember I used to get to the student union super early. I had one of my closest friends lived in Westminster, and he would drive an hour, if not more, every day to and from College Park. And so we'd get there early, and we would eat Chick-fil-A breakfast sandwiches and watch South Park. And then we would do our homework together. And then you'd go to your first class at 8. And at that point, you'd done an hour and a half of homework together and had some Chick-fil-A. It was great.
Oh, my gosh. I love that.
Yeah. So I did that. And the way I got myself into the intelligence community was kind of by accident. I was applying for jobs my junior year. And I applied for a job at Lockheed Martin. I got an interview at Lockheed Martin, Crystal City, and I go to the building, and it says Lockheed on top. And I go into my first interview because it was like a set of 3. And the guy goes, so you're not interviewing for Lockheed, right? I said, I did not know that. I'm in a Lockheed building. And it was, at the time, Lockheed had just divested the SI organization to its own company. And so I was
Can you tell people what SI means?
Systems Integration Organization.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, of course. And I said, no, I did not know that, but okay. So we're doing these interviews. And I remember one of them, the guy said, I can't tell you what you're going to do. It's classified, but you're going to work with the customers and you're going to work on mission. You're going to love it. No idea what I was getting into, but I knew I really liked him. And I was like, I think I want to work with this guy. And so I accepted the job. And my first job was working in acquisition at NGA, building schedules. Didn't see that coming, did you?
No.
Of all places.
It was really cool. She's like, oh, you're going to have a super classified job. And I worked on schedules. So wait, we have to go back. We have to take this in pieces. Okay. So let's start from the beginning of that story.
Okay.
Do you still like dolphins?
Love dolphins.
Where was the first time you saw a dolphin?
My family grew up going to Bethany Beach. From the time that I was 3, and we've stayed in the same, we don't own a house, but we stay in the same house every year for the last 32 years.
Wow.
Yeah, and you sit on the beach and you look at dolphins and you get some,
Wow.
everybody stands up and gets excited and there's dolphin sighting and then the whole beach gets up, right? That kind of vibe.
Do you like if people buy you dolphin stuff?
No.
Okay. No,
That's
it's a good
an
question.
important
It's a
note.
very important question.
Jamie, that was for you.
Suzanne, that was also for you. Okay, so that was my number one question.
Were you going to buy her something dolphin?
No, I just know
She
people
was.
who the question I really want to ask, I don't know if it's appropriate, so I'm not going to ask that. So that was my second question.
Can we go back to the inappropriate
No,
question?
we can't. And so then I thought about the people who love stuff but they hate getting that stuff. And I also think about, we're Iron Butterfly and people buy us a lot of butterfly stuff. I don't mind it. I actually like it, but I know people who are like, no, don't, they don't like. That's why I had that question.
Good question.
So then my next thing was, I thought it's so interesting that you went from sea to air,
Sea to space.
sea to
Oh.
space.
Yeah. I mean, I think it was just, I decided I needed to choose a career that I think at the time, right, there was a big push in STEM because there's always going to be jobs for STEM. And so I was like, okay, engineering sounds interesting. I think engineers get jobs. I mean, it's funny. I will tell people, I almost dropped out of aerospace engineering at least twice, right?
Really?
It is an incredibly hard program, demanding of my time. I didn't drink in college. Not that I didn't drink, but I didn't go out. I didn't do social events. As I said, I had Chick-fil-A. I did homework. I went to my classes. You did homework after. I also had a part-time job. I worked at the rock climbing wall.
Ooh.
I did some rock climbing and some.
Do you still do that?
Unfortunately, no, not anymore.
I'm sorry.
I know. my rock climbing shoes and harness are sitting in a closet. But that's all I did, and it was hard. But now looking back, and then I said, I'm never going back to school, right? After I got that degree, I was like, I'm done. And then I got a master's degree part-time while I was working
In?
systems engineering.
Wow.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
Which was, it's funny, I was thinking about this on the way here. Systems and that degree, it was great because I was doing a systems engineering role at the time. And so studying while you're applying in your day job was actually incredibly helpful.
Mm-hmm.
But everybody was remote because everybody was distributed across the U.S. and it was like remote work before
It was cool.
it was cool. Yeah. And which I was like, I wonder if I learned anything from that. Probably.
Just that you were comfortable doing
Yeah,
it.
I guess that's true.
Yeah.
So, Caitlin, aren't you a record holder of some kind
Back
with
to-
your aerospace background?
Back to those helicopters. This came up yesterday, actually, because one of the guys we recently hired at my current company also worked on the helicopter program. It was called Gamera. And he worked on the project at the same time, or same time I did. We overlapped, but didn't know each other too well. And so yesterday we were kind of unpacking it and pulling up old videos and stuff. And there was a Sikorsky challenge for building a human-powered helicopter that could fly for, I would say it was like a minute and a half, 10 feet, and it can't leave like a 10 meter by 10 meter box. And we flew for that challenge the week of my senior graduation. We didn't get the challenge. However, we did get the world record for longest duration of human-powered helicopter flight at the time.
Whoa.
Debatably better.
It's kind of cool.
That's cool.
It's kind of cool.
That's super
Now
cool.
that I don't do helicopters.
That's like a party.
Well, you broke the world record. Why did you need to stay doing helicopters?
Yeah.
You've done all there was to do.
Yeah. I do laugh, right, per that story, studying helicopters and then accidentally and choosing to do fixed wing in college, and then now finding myself working specifically with satellites and satellite data. Like, well, maybe I should have chosen a different path, but I don't regret it for a second, right? I always tell people, yeah, I almost dropped out, but God, was it worth it, right? I wouldn't change anything.
I love that.
So let's go back, dun dun dun, to building schedules. Do you want to explain what that is?
Yeah. So, I mean, when I tell the story, I do laugh about it, right? Because I went from my hard engineering classes where I'm building or designing planes and helicopters, and then I'm building schedules. However, it was the best first job. When you're building a schedule and you are meeting with all of these teams to understand their dependencies upon each other, and when we're working with the NGA acquisition group, it's okay. What are we acquiring? What is dependent on what? How do these systems and acquisitions, what's the interplay? What is the status of them? What are they, as I'm learning? And in every senior meeting, there's a schedule. There's always a schedule. And so I got the opportunity to learn about NGA, the different parts of NGA, what they're acquiring, and then sit in these senior meetings and hear how people were discussing their decisions. And that was the best introduction to what I would say, like my introduction to the Intel community.
That's awesome. And so how long were you doing that for?
Well, I lasted 6 months.
This just keeps getting better and better.
Well, because I actually, it was great. I had the opportunity, the SI organization at the time had a leadership development program. And so that program is rotational. So you do 3 one-year rotations plus get your master's degree, which is
nice.
how I ended up doing that, saying, okay, I'll get another degree. And so I got into that and therefore had to start my first rotation. So that's why I left schedules after 6 months. That was a great opportunity. And then I did actually an internal rotation doing, I remember we had one of those touch tables for doing an imagery analysis, not a light table, but one of the kind of like your TV screen now, but it was a table. And it was back when activity-based intelligence was like the hot topic, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we were building some internal analysis tools for activity-based intelligence, which was fun. And then I did another role at NGA. I went back and I worked in the test organization, which is super cool. So before they put anything into production, and that means from a tasking perspective, from an analysis perspective, you name it, you have to test and make sure it works and there's no bugs so that when you need it, it works.
Mm-hmm.
And so we got to sit and test out new products, get to order satellite imagery, and then work with the vendors who are building it to fix bugs and things like that. Super cool experience. However, like 3 weeks into that job, my full scope poly comes through, and they're like, okay, now you got 6 months to use it or lose it. So I stayed there for 6 months, and then I ended up doing a really fun job at CIA, and that was my last rotation.
Awesome.
Yeah.
How cool. That's like a great beginning.
So this is one of these things where I think sometimes contractors get a bad rap, but working for a contractor with a bunch of different contracts with different customers, doing different kinds of, whether it's engineering services or analysis, you have the opportunity to stay within a company, have that same community, but then also move and learn on different contracts.
And contribute to the mission.
And still contribute to the mission. I mean, you're doing mission. You're on site with the customer. It's one team. I always say, the government and contractors, we're all on the same team. We just get paid by somebody different.
I think it's so, I feel like you could not state that enough. And I don't think we do, especially on this podcast, because we've had lots of government employees. But I also, my background was strictly contracting. And you can, I think, people don't know that, especially young folks, they think, the only way I'm really going to contribute to the mission is if I'm in government, which is great. If you go that way, great. You should, if that's where you want to be. But you can also do really cool stuff in industry. And you can work at all of the agencies, and you can work on all of the programs.
Yeah, not just really cool stuff, but literally the same stuff.
Same stuff.
Like in government, I had no idea on my team who was a blue badger, who was a government employee, and who was a green badger, who was a contractor. There's literally no difference. The work you're doing is the exact same. Mm-hmm. Okay, so you end up at CIA.
I end up at CIA.
You're going to end up back there.
I'm going to end up back there.
Okay, so what happens at CIA? Where do you go after CIA?
So I was at CIA, still working for the SI organization, and at this point, I'd done a lot of systems engineering roles and project management roles. A lot of PowerPoint. A lot of PowerPoint. We live and die on PowerPoint.
That's fun.
Hey, I always say a blank PowerPoint slide is my canvas.
Yeah,
I agree.
You're unique.
Well, I just in this industry, PowerPoint is one of our most effective and consistent ways of communicating information, and I don't see us getting out of it.
I could not agree more.
Well, you have to understand not everyone loves doing them.
That's fair. That's fair.
Yin and yang.
And I remember having this internal dialogue of can I even engineer anymore? Right? I've been doing PowerPoint. Can I engineer? And so I started looking at engineering roles, And I literally, through LinkedIn, In-Q-Tel had posted a systems engineering role. And systems engineering there is kind of like their test engineering group. And so I interviewed and I went over there. And the first 3 months, I taught myself Linux because I had to understand Linux to do. We were working with a company that was building software-defined radios, and to interact with them, I had to learn how to use Linux. And I said, "Cool, I can still do this. I don't want to do this." But it was really good for me to have that experience and say, "Okay, I can. I still feel like I can engineer, but that's not what I want to do for my career." And I always say the best thing about having an engineering background, even if I'm not using it, it's how you look at problems. It's critical thinking. It's honestly just knowing what questions to ask. And I think that is really what's been most important of having my engineering degrees in my career.
And what I love about that story too is that you tested yourself, right? And it's okay to do that. And what I'm seeing is you're trying this and you're like, oh, love that. Trying this. Oh, don't love that. And that's what you should be doing, right? You should be testing yourself, testing your skills, testing the things you see if you like or you don't like. And I think that's a really important lesson for people who are growing in their career.
For sure.
When I like to mentor quite a bit, and when I mentor people and they're talking about, I'm just trying to, maybe I'm coming out of government and just I don't know what job I want to do. I said, you know what, just get a job. Honestly, one of the most important things is learning what you don't want to do.
100%.
Totally.
100%.
And then you get in and you're like, you know what, I don't want to do this. But now that you're working for a company, you start to learn about other roles and you're like, oh, maybe I want to do that, which is what I did at In-Q-Tel. I said, oh, I don't want to do this, but I think I'm really great at program management. I'm going to go do that. And that's what I did. So I was a program manager for about a little over 2 years. A program manager at In-Q-Tel manages the contracts that In-Q-Tel does with these startup companies on behalf of the U.S. government. And in that role, not only are you managing the contract with the customer, but you're also working with the startup companies. So it's this perfect role where you're the relationship person with your end customer and the companies and getting to know the technology and then how it's going to be used and applied. And it's like the most perfect role.
Perfect role for a social engineer.
For a social engineer
100%.
who happens to be very organized and OCD. Just being honest.
Can you say like a few sentences on what In-Q-Tel is and why it's important as an organization?
So In-Q-Tel was started by the CIA. I don't want to date it. I want to say it was at least 25 years ago. To strategically invest in startup tech companies on behalf of the U.S. government. So it was at the time, right? You have your Silicon Valley boom of all these companies building this great tech, but maybe it's 5 people in a garage, and getting that tech into the CIA or any other intel agency is not an easy task. They don't have those relationships or understand the contracting mechanisms and things like that. So In-Q-Tel provides a way to help bridge that gap and transition this new technology to the government. I think one of the key things is maintaining the commercial viability of that product as well. So you don't want to go work with a startup company and then add a bunch of requirements, and then all of a sudden they built this custom product for the government and it's no longer something they can sell commercially. I think you want to make sure that you still have a commercially viable product, but also maybe happens to work on Internet Explorer 8 that the government can use and things like that. I say that flippantly, but I think it's true.
No, that is actually reality. Yeah.
So that is what they do, and it's not just CIA. They also work with all the other intel agencies, even with DoD, and so it's also a great opportunity to get to understand these missions and mission gaps of almost all of the intel community.
Yeah, that's really
super
cool.
cool.
Yeah, that is cool. The other thing that's cool about like In-Q-Tel and being a program manager there specifically is you get to work with companies that are literally at every stage. So like you have some companies that have like, $100 million of funding, and some that are like 2 guys that are brothers who like started this company in their garage. So I'm curious if you learned like about what types of companies you like or like were drawn to versus like which ones you were like, maybe not for me.
I would say they're all unique, and the stage of the company is also unique in regards to what challenges they're facing. Some of them is just getting a viable product. Some of it is, how do I scale, right? How do I scale so that we can continue to build this product? Because Because at the end of the day, too, you really want these companies to be a company that exists. Because if they build a tech and then the company goes under, then who's supporting the tech anymore from that side? So they all have their own unique challenges, and you learn a little bit about each of those things. I think this isn't going to surprise you, my favorite companies were the ones that I enjoyed working with the most, right?
Yeah.
You can tell when there are people who are just so enthusiastic about what they do and what that technology can do for people and the government and the mission. And those people are just so much fun to work with, because they also, a lot of them don't come from a background in the national security community, so they just have different perspectives that I think are super interesting, and you learn a lot from that.
I love
Totally.
that.
So you were at InQtel, you were an engineer, then you were a program manager, and then you made another transition.
Yeah, so I was at a InQtel event, and I met a customer, and he and I just hit it off and had a great conversation. He's like, I'm trying to work more closely with InQtel and build these relationships. And he actually ended up bringing me in and reading me into his compartments, because he's like, if you now understand what we do, you'll be able to better help us. And that was an awesome opportunity. And he also said, I'm looking for more systems engineering and SI support if you know anybody. And some friends of mine,
If you know anybody.
Some friends of mine from the SI organization had actually just started their own company. And so I connected them, and I said, I think these guys are great. This customer is great. You guys go meet and be merry. And I got a call like a week later from my friends, and they said, so do you want the job? And I hadn't really thought about leaving InQtel, but it was an opportunity to go work in this mission that I had been read into, so I knew what it was. I got to work at headquarters. And as a contractor, again, that was the closest I felt like I was ever to mission.
That's really cool.
It was a small group in a mission center, and it wasn't like there's a lot of different roles to play in mission. And this one was very forward in the mission. It wasn't just enabling technology, it was doing mission a different way. I don't really know how to explain it in an unclassified way, but it was an awesome experience. It was an awesome experience.
So what was your favorite thing about that job? And then what were you kind of like, what did you not love about that job?
One of my favorite parts about that job, at the time I was living in Alexandria, and every morning I would drive up GW Parkway, I'd pass the airport, look at the planes flying. I would then look to my right, I'd see the river and the monuments.
I love that.
And then I see the Pentagon on my left, and then I pull into CIA headquarters. And that is such a profound feeling of just like, I can't believe I do this.
And it never gets old.
Never gets old.
And if it does, I feel like if it does,
I've heard
then
you say this.
yeah, you shouldn't be here anymore.
Yeah.
Like it should always feel like that. I feel like that every time I drive.
It kind of gives you that butterfly.
Yeah.
The tear comes a little
Yeah.
bit. Yeah.
Totally.
So that was just one of those things I really remember about that experience. Again, that job and just being in it and understanding the mission in a different way. And it provided me the opportunity to look at the mission and what we do in the intel community differently and from a perspective I hadn't had before. And that was amazing. But this is kind of funny. It was actually more of a cyber-focused mission. And I really missed working in space. I just missed the space industry. A lot of my best friends and my husband were all in the industry together, and that's what I was doing when I wasn't working, was hanging out with all my aerospace friends, and I just missed it. And I had a mentor at the time, and I remember I asked her for coffee, and we sat down, and I said, I'm trying to think about, I really love this job, but I really miss aerospace. I'm trying to think about like, what do I do, and what's my next move? And she goes, I have some people you should talk to. And I went to Space Symposium in 2018. I had an informal conversation on the patio with 3 folks from Ball Aerospace.
That was where we met, by the way.
I thought we met at GeoInt.
Oh, we did meet at GeoInt.
Other conference.
Also on the patio.
Also on the patio and then on a boat.
Patio ladies.
Patio ladies.
Hashtag. New hashtag.
You can find me on the patio.
Oh my God.
They flew me to Colorado a week later. Oh, this is funny. Okay. So I flew to Colorado to interview, and I walk into the lobby outside of the office I was interviewing in, and there's this guy, and he's waiting for something to print off the printer. He turns around and introduces himself, and he's like, "Well, I guess I'm interviewing you. I haven't read your resume yet." And I was like, "Good, okay." And he looks at it and he's like, "You know, this job is like BD and strategy, and you don't have any roles that say BD and strategy." I was like, "Yeah, I get it." And he's like, "All right, well, let's talk." And we all sit down and we had this wonderful conversation. At the end of it, he looks at me and he goes, "Okay, I get it."
Oh,
And then
that's
I joined
so
Ball.
cool.
Oh, and so how long were you there?
5.5 years. 5.5 years. They're based out of Colorado, but they have a small office here in DC that does strategy and business development and lobbying. And the woman who had brought me over ran the office here in DC, and she really stood up for me and said, "Trust me, I know Caitlin. I'll support her and my team here," but I actually worked for a team that was in Colorado.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I kind of
That's cool.
it was a really great opportunity because I had, a full-time job. I had a team in Colorado, the National Defense team that I supported. But because I was also kind of this adopted member of the team in DC, I got to be involved in these conversations around strategy and around government relations. And I had a great perspective. And then it made me feel like I had kind of a community here versus being that remote employee, which is kind of nice.
Did you have to travel back and forth a lot?
I did, and I miss it. Oh, I love going to Colorado. It's like my home away from home.
I think, I don't want to take your question.
Go for it.
But I think it's a good,
go for it.
a good point. Where Katie has told me that one thing that you talk about a lot and you say in a very unique way is this, idea of work-life balance. And sometimes I hate when people ask that, especially of women,
Totally.
because they're expecting a certain answer,
Totally.
right? Like, you can do it all.
You can't
or
be a mom and work at the same time.
there's no right answer, right? And so I'm wondering if you could share with us because this is a prime example, right? You were working here. They were allowing you to work from here, but you were traveling back and forth to Colorado, which is hard, right? And so tell us your thoughts on work-life balance.
Work-life balance is my trigger word because I think I don't always agree with the way people present it and how they use it in regards to balancing, how do you do it all? And so what I think about in work-life balance is, what are the things that you value, right? Doesn't matter what that is, whether it's, you have your children that you need to support, you have your family, you have your friends, you teach yoga. It doesn't matter what it is. What are the things that you value? And if you are able to make time to do the things that make you happy as well as doing your job, then you have that, there's that balance, right? And I've always tried to frame my job in regards to, not only is it just my job, but what are the other things about my job that really bring me value and make me happy, that therefore I look at being at this job not like a job, right? This is just an extension of my life. And I've always said too that my personal life and my work life overlap quite a bit. And I actually really enjoy that. That actually, I think, gives me a balance that I really value and appreciate, versus some people like to keep them separate. But again, that's what they value, and that's okay too.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I just think there's different ways of looking at it. And it's all about what you value and making sure that you provide time and space for that, and that you're not giving up things that make you happy because you're working.
And it's unique to each individual.
It is unique to
You
each
can't tell
individual.
one person how their work-life balance should be, or what they value, or like you said, some people, I believe for myself as well, work and life bleed, right? Into one another. But that doesn't work for everyone, and that's totally okay. So it's hard when you ask that question, because I can't tell you what a good work-life balance is for you, just like you couldn't tell it for me. So thank you for sharing that, because I think it's important for people to hear that, look, this is what works for me.
This is my balance.
Yeah, this is my balance.
I also love that you mentioned that your work life and your life like interact. There's like a lot of overlap, right? Particularly in your relationships. And I know that's really important to you. I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about, like, you are one of the best community builders and relationship builders that I know. Like, what is your approach to doing that? Like, how do you do that? How have you built this community that's trusted and fun and that like you share so generously? Like, how have you built that?
Yeah, great question. I don't think I've ever really thought about it, so let's just go with it in real time. Very much a people person. Whenever I meet somebody new, I'm always interested in learning about them and trying to understand, like, again, Katie, what's your story? What are you interested in? What are the things that you do when you're not working? Then I also will say, hey, you love yoga. I got a friend who teaches yoga. Let me connect you. I get such joy out of connecting people in my life and in my different circles who I think will mutually just really enjoy and learn from each other. And whether that's just from shared interests or from a professional networking perspective, I just love to connect people and bring those people together and provide spaces to bring those people together. And I think I've just been doing that for so long that I once a month, I'll get an email or a text from someone, hey, I know somebody, can I introduce them to you? I think it'd be great for you to get to know them, have coffee. And then I'll always say yes, I have a conversation. And then I always try from those conversations to think of one more connection. What's that one more degree that I can say, now I think you should go meet Megan. Mm-hmm. I think you guys have a great conversation about X because you both are interested in this thing or have this shared experience. And it just constantly kind of creates this spider web of connectivity. And hopefully just, again, providing opportunities for people to learn and grow, maybe professionally and personally.
Mm-hmm. I think it sounds like she gets that from her parents.
My mom will take credit. My mom likes to take credit for that, and I have to give it to her. And I will, as I mentioned, our family and our family friends are what I've always looked at as my family. Yeah. And we were never treated as though we were the children who got put at the kids' table. We were always just all part of the experience and the party. And and so I feel like I've been connecting and communicating with people of all ages and all backgrounds for a really long time. And I think that's why I learned to talk to people, how I've been learned how to talk with people.
That's how I viewed it.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, we have to give Caitlin a shout out because the last time you did this and connected me with someone that you thought I would get along with was Jenny, who Caitlin met at Ball and who is now a volunteer member with Iron Butterfly Foundation.
Yeah. And we love her.
We do.
Shout out Jenny.
Her. We do.
We all love Jenny.
We love you, Jenny.
So I think the natural progression here is, like, tell us what you like to do for fun. I just learned something about you. I mean, I think you have a lot to tell us, but I want to know.
Caitlin has a strong work-life balance. She has a lot of fun.
Yes. So tell us about what you love to do, what your passions are, what you're doing outside of work.
Outside of work, I'm kind of thinking about my week schedule. Like, what are the things that I did this week, right? I love yoga. I try and do yoga 2 mornings a week, and I am able to hold my schedule, and I don't let meetings happen until after 9 a.m. So that way I have time to do yoga. So I block off space for that. Mm-hmm. I play soccer 2 nights a week. I love playing soccer. I grew up playing, and so now I play in rec leagues. One of the teams I've been playing with for over 12 years, which is kind of fun.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
Yeah, I also love that Caitlin's soccer nickname is Boom, which I feel like that tells you basically everything you need to know about Caitlin.
Do you know why it's Boom?
I would love you to tell the story.
This was, I don't know, probably 10 years ago at this point, and it was my birthday. And there was an email thread going around about coordinating something for soccer. And there is a South African rugby player who shares my birthday named Boom. And so my husband threw it into the email chat about, Caitlin and Boom share a birthday. And then I got the nickname Boom. And now it's funny because it's stuck. And so we've had new people join the team over the years. And in emails, I'm always Boom. And then someone will call me Caitlin. And they're like, who's Caitlin? They literally will be like, or they'll say, where is Caitlin? Is she coming tonight? I thought she was on the roster. And I'm like, oh, I'm Caitlin. But they just know me as Boom.
Oh, I love it.
Incredible.
So we have yoga.
Yes.
We have soccer. I've heard about. Okay, I'm gonna let you go, but
I know where you're getting with this one. I'll share it. I'll share my
okay,
secrets.
let's do it.
I am really into fashion. I love going out to eat and for drinks. And I love traveling. And during the beginning of COVID, I started an Instagram account to capture the things that I love. It's called Drink, Shop, Repeat. And it's pictures of outfits and it's pictures of drinks and experiences. And I really enjoy going back and scrolling through it because it just kind of brings back memories and also some fashion ideas.
It's like historical.
It's like historical. I did get sponsored a few times and got some free stuff out of it, which is kind of fun. But now that, post-COVID life has picked up, I haven't kept up with it. But it's still out there. If I get followers from this.
You might.
Oh, I hope that you do.
I apologize for the lack of new content.
Well, you might need to start it up again.
This might, yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. And then on the weekends, I eat, drink, and watch a lot of soccer and watch a lot of Formula One.
Oh my gosh. That's cool.
Yeah. Really got into Formula One. My husband lived overseas and was living on the Abu Dhabi racetrack. And he was running the racetrack and sending pictures of it all the time. And we started talking about the races, especially when he wasn't here. It was something we kind of shared together. And so then Drive to Survive came out on Netflix. And so my family got into it. And our friends got into it. And so now there's several group chats. There's a Formula One fantasy league. And
oh my gosh.
yeah, and we're actually going to the Abu Dhabi race in December.
Wow.
I'm really excited. Really excited.
Holy moly.
Really into race car driving
I mean,
and pretty men.
well,
I mean,
doesn't hurt.
That's not to lie.
I mean, we're just being honest on this podcast, right?
We love it.
We certainly do.
We love it.
No judgment zone.
For sure. No judgment. Yeah.
So I would love to know, Caitlin, you have had like 12 different careers and a bunch of different career transitions. And I think that is not only unconventional, it's like very intimidating for a lot of people who are told that your career has to look a certain way and it has to progress a certain way that's like very linear. How do you think about that?
Yeah. So it's funny. I didn't plan, right? I didn't plan to have this career path. Again, I ended up in the Intel community because I thought I was going to work at Lockheed, right? I didn't know. But I've always taken new jobs, kind of how I took the first job, where I've met somebody and I'm like, what you're doing seems awesome. The mission seems super cool. It's a new way for me to experience giving back to the mission. And I want to work with you. I want to go do that job. And that's kind of how I moved about. And then now I look back. Again, I didn't plan this, but I look back and I've been able to support the community in so many different ways, different agencies, different roles, as a contractor, working in startup investment kind of life, working in industry as a hardware and software provider to the government. I gotten to have this experience from all these different perspectives. And ultimately, I wouldn't be in the place I am now if I didn't have that, but I didn't plan it. And so when I talk with people, because again, my parents love to give me a hard time. I'm like, you can't leave a job after a year. Like that doesn't look good on a resume. And it's all about the narrative and the story, right? It's why did you take that next job? What were you looking for? What were you looking to learn? What were you looking to gain? It's not like, oh, I hated this job. I never hated a job. It's just I really wanted to get back into aerospace and I wanted to look for an opportunity to do that. And so then I looked that's how I got into that job. And so it's always about it's the narrative of what have you learned in your previous job, and then what are you looking to learn in the next job, and what are you looking to give? And that's how I look at the transition. So I don't think it matters how long you've been in a role. It's about the narrative of what you've learned and what you want to learn.
Totally agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also think it's cool because in those transitions, I'm sure you've learned something like about yourself because like those are pretty big swings, right? And I imagine it's like a process of almost like self-discovery.
It's especially in my current role, especially with each of those bigger transitions, it's really intimidating. And I've learned a lot about what I can do. I think everybody's got a little bit of imposter syndrome, especially as a woman in the industry. And every time I've taken kind of that new role with that new push of something different, I'm very intimidated. But all of a sudden I learn, oh, I can do this.
Mm-hmm.
And there are skills and things that I've learned and I've been able to apply. And I'm like, this is the same thing I was doing there, just in a different way, right? Or, yeah. So I think each of those transitions have been difficult but impactful in learning about myself and what I can do.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's so important. You know, Katie and I say, you know, we didn't know we could do podcasting. And then we didn't know we could produce and direct a documentary. We didn't know we could start organizations. And you push yourself and you're like, oh, wow, we did it and we learned it. And I think what we like to say is you can really learn anything if you have the will, you know, the resources and the perseverance, because it's not going to be easy, right? But if you want to learn something new, you can. And when it gets scary, I think those are the things you should go towards when it's a little scary, and just tell yourself you can do it. It might be hard. You're going to have to put in some blood, sweat, and tears sometimes, but you're going to learn it.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to figure it out. And I think that's really cool.
I always say if you get a little too comfortable and complacent in a job, it's time to go.
Yeah.
You don't want to get too comfortable. You want to always be challenging yourself and continuing to grow. And I think if you get too comfortable, I think you can become a little complacent. And I think to continue to grow, and that's something that I strive to do, you got to challenge yourself and look for an opportunity to do something different.
Yeah.
So what are you doing now?
I'm the VP of product for a software startup company. Yeah. Which I found because when I was at Ball Aerospace, we had been working with this company. And so I'd gotten to know the team and I got to know the technology. And when I got to know the team a little bit better, and I said, I really believe in what they're doing and how it can impact the mission in a different way. And again, it's software and it's security, and it's something that I actually know a little bit about, but not a lot, which is incredibly scary.
Mm-hmm.
But the team is wonderful, and I knew I wanted to work with them, and I knew that what I think we're doing is game changing to the Intel community, and so then I hopped over. It's a small team. It's 40 people. I've never worked at a startup. I've worked with startups, but I've never worked with a startup or at a startup before. And I'm learning. I've been there 4 months, and what I've learned in 4 months, I did not believe I could learn this much in 4 months.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's great.
It really is.
Wow. I think people are going to get so much out of just your story and how it progressed and the different, challenges and leaps and transitions you've had. And, I'm not sure if you know, but this season has focused on the butterfly effect and how people affect change sometimes on an individual, basis. Sometimes they affect change in an institution, or, they can affect change globally. And so I'm wondering if you could give us an example or a story of how you believe you've affected change.
So I've thought about this a little bit. And I really do think my butterfly effect has been my community and my impact on people. There have been a couple people that I've been lucky enough to meet and get to know, and they maybe were looking at what their next transition was, and I've been able to connect them and help them get that next job. And I like to think that now they're set up for future success, and really, what their next step is in their career, and how that changes their career trajectory over time. You can only look back and we'll see. But I like to think that it was such a little effort on my part, right? Having conversations, sending emails, it's little effort, but the impact it can make to somebody is huge.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I like to think when I'm taking these just calls and coffees. And I even had a call recently with a sophomore in high school who really wants to get into engineering. And I gave him, what I think was some practical advice about how to look at programs and things. And, maybe that affects where he goes and how he chooses. And I don't know, but those little conversations in those 30 minutes, it's a little bit of my time, but it can mean a lot to somebody else. And I think that's my butterfly effect.
I love that.
I do too. It's also so cool to think about just like if you help somebody make a decision about their own life, like that is a really big impact.
Yeah.
And everything that that person does is in some ways attributable to like the guidance that you gave them and the time that you spent with them and like the coffee that you bought for them. It's actually like really cool to think about impact that way.
Yeah.
And it doesn't even have to be advice. It just could be you sitting with them and talking them through.
Yeah, that's
like
right.
them saying, I have these 5 schools and I don't know which one. And it's you just saying, well, this school is like this and this school's like this. And it's not even telling him or her. It's just giving them the information. That's still a huge impact. Taking the time to share your institutional knowledge or your knowledge on whatever it is. So it's big.
I think sometimes we take for granted that, again, we're just doing a job and, we're sitting and having coffee and we have all this information in our head and experiences and it's just this what we've done. But things that like, how else do people know if they don't ask questions and if no one tells them? So for example, I like to talk to a lot of folks who are in government and they're thinking about going into industry and they have no idea what even industry looks like. What are the opportunities? And even just explaining, okay, well, there's FFRDCs, there's a contractor shop, there's systems and integration shops, but then there's also like services and different kinds of services. And then there's building satellites. These are all different opportunities and paths you can take to support the mission. And they're all each unique and different in their own ways, but some people just don't even know that. And we've been in it long enough, so we just know.
We take it for granted, but
just don't think about it. We don't think about the fact that a lot of people don't know that, and just sharing that information and that knowledge can really help them with their decision making and their choices, right?
Absolutely.
Totally. So Caitlin, I think we are coming to the end. This has totally flown by for me. So we end each episode with the same question, which is in keeping with the name of our podcast, Iron Butterfly. If you had to give yourself a code name, what would it be and why?
I think you're going to love this one.
I'm so excited.
My code name would be Evergreen.
Oh my God, stop.
There's a couple parts to that. One, I think an evergreen is an amazing tree. It is incredibly resilient to its environment, and it's beautiful. And I think that is something that I just appreciate. It's kind of one of those like wonders of the world of how does that, like nature is beautiful and how does that happen, right? But I also want to be resilient, right? There's a lot of things in our lives that we can't control. So I want to think about and how do I be resilient to things that I cannot change and things that I cannot control. I love snowboarding. I didn't even bring that up. Snowboarding is one of my favorite passions. It is my happy place. I have a really hard time finding a sense of contentment and being happy and content in the place that I am. I'm always moving. I'm always looking to do something else. I'm like, what else do I need to do? What's on my list? I have so many lists. But when I'm snowboarding and you have nowhere to be but on that mountain snowboarding that day, because that's what you're there for.
Yeah.
That is one of those places I most consistently find contentment, and evergreens make me think of that piece. And then the last piece is, so I helped found the Command Purpose organization. And when Katie and our friend Erin and I were sitting down and we were going through the programming for the first time, one of the things we did was after we'd kind of finished the program, we just painted. We put on some music and we painted. Erin painted what ultimately became the Command Purpose logo. I believe Katie painted flowers in a sun.
No.
What was it?
No. This is why I love this story, because I painted like a really jacked up, like emotionally disturbed scale. And you guys, we all like went into opposite corners, and you guys came back with like the most beautiful things. And it was like, I was like, oh, I think I need to work on this.
It was beautiful in its own way.
Thank you. But I'm really glad you remembered it as flowers. I'm going to start telling it that way.
Flowers, yeah. Beautiful flowers. And I painted an evergreen. And I remember, and Katie brings this up every so often, of like, remember that evergreen you painted? It was so beautiful.
It was.
Where is it now?
I wish I knew that
In our
answer.
memory.
In my memory. I wish I knew that answer. I bet you have a picture of it in my phone somewhere.
Yeah, probably.
Oh,
Yeah.
I want to see it if you find it.
I will look. I do have actually a couple paintings on my wall at home that are of the mountains and of evergreens.
Mm-hmm.
Caitlin, thank you so much for joining us. We are just thrilled that you said yes, and thank you for being a really special part of this community. We are thankful, and I hope you had a little fun tonight.
Yeah, thank you for asking, and thank you for being part of my community.
You're the best.
You're the best. I love you guys.
We love you too.
This has been an episode of Iron Butterfly Podcast. We want to thank the National Security Institute at George Mason Scalia Law School, our founding sponsor, and Amazing Women of the IC for their promotion. To learn more about Iron Butterfly Media, visit our website at www.ironbutterflymedia.com. You can also learn more about NSI and upcoming events at nationalsecurity.gmu.edu. And to find out more about AWIC, email amazingwomen.ic@gmail.com. And if you like the show, please be sure to rate, review, and subscribe. Lastly, we want to thank our podcast producer, Amanda Young, and the entire Iron Butterfly team. Stay fierce, and we'll talk next time.